Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 381 of the Health Detective Podcast. Our guest has already been an absolute just great person to work with. We were supposed to have her on the other day, so I apologize if you guys saw that title and saw it disappear. That was on my end, but she was very able to get us back in, which was great, especially before the holidays. If you were wondering what is going on with this guy's background, what is he doing here? Two things. One, I'm traveling for Thanksgiving, so this looks a lot better than my current background. I promise you that. But two, if you missed our Lab and Learn yesterday with Dr. Aaron Gonshore, I definitely recommend you go check that out. If you haven't been on the Lab and Learns, please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. I hate to be the cheesy YouTuber that's like, can you subscribe to the channel? But seriously, if you want those Lab and Learns, we're doing them twice a month right now, and I set a goal to do them every single week come the new year. So you guys are loving that stuff. We usually have 40 to 60 people live on those, and we'd love to do more and have you on those. So please make sure you're subscribed to catch those. But the reason I have this background is not just because I'm trying to hide my current background, my actual one. It is because of the announcement we gave yesterday. So you guys probably heard, if you're regular listeners on the podcast, that we did something called the Hicks Conference in October of 2024 this year in San Diego, California. Now, Reed actually hosted legitimate FDN, the title was FDN Conference, before the pandemic. And then, the pandemic happens, and you guys, it's not appropriate to share numbers. It's not my place in the company, but I will just say I was stunned when I found out how much risk and how much money these people spend just so all of us can go enjoy a couple days at a conference. I mean, these people plan for a year plus and risk everything to be able to do this. So, of course, we're not in the businesses of conferences. So he likes it, but was like, all right, we can't be, doing hundreds of thousands of dollars every time for these conferences. So thank God for Jeremy Maleka and Jen Maleka, because they got the Hicks Conference going on. We brought over 70 FDNs to the Hicks Conference. And then Reed told me the next day when we were at his house, he's like, you know what? This is the move. We just start being the biggest sponsor at the conference, and then someone else can host it. So because of that, we are doing the first East Coast FDN conference, and this is going to be going down in Miami, Florida, February 28th and March 1st of 2025. I can't say exact numbers, but let's just say just from the momentum yesterday, it looks like quite a few people will be there. We had over 130 people in our graduate group who had showed interest. So we are sponsoring this via the Biohacker Expo. Sandy Martin is the host for that. She'll be on the podcast very soon, possibly as early as next week, to share the details with you guys. So go to biohackerexpo.com, code HDP at checkout. Because we're planning on a lot of FDNs coming, Sandy actually gave us 50% off the tickets. The tickets are normally $600. They are $297 for people who either consume our information or podcasts or are graduates or trainees. Can't wait to see you guys there. Thank you for my little ad there. And I only did it 4 minutes, not bad. All right, let's get to our guest, what you guys are actually here for. So Bria is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, holistic health coach, and certified personal trainer who specializes in female hormones, helping women with weight release and energy gain in pre- and post-menopause, and finding clarity in hormonal chaos. Her podcast, The Period Whisperer, is that was something I would never thought I would say that smoothly on a live podcast. The Period Whisperer is a top 1.5% wellness podcast in the world with an Instagram following of over 17,000 people. She has been featured in Fox News, Women's Health, and top women's podcasts such as the Midlife Makeover Show and V-Shred's Better Body, Better Life podcast, to name a few. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Detective Ev. I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah, and like I was saying off air, I mean this seriously. We're grateful to have you. What we love about our show is that we bring on people that sometimes it's their first podcast. Sometimes it's like their millionth because they've sold literally over 1 million books, like the William Davis guy with Wheat Belly. I love to really highlight the people that are in between, the people that have taken the opportunities in this functional health world and are real business people, right? They take it seriously and actually develop a real brand and following with it. So I'm sure we'll touch on that today. What I'm most interested about first, though, if we can, is I want to know about you. I'd love to hear your story and how you got into this. So, my first question I always ask on the show when it's relevant is what did your symptoms look like and when did they begin?
Hmm. Yes. So I built an initial business in health coaching, fitness as a fitness trainer and nutrition coach, probably starting around the age of 27 when my kids were young. And it was a really great business for me. And then around the age of like 35 to 37, I noticed a change in my clients. First, it was like they just weren't getting the same results. They weren't feeling the same. They were having some more menstrual irregularities and issues. And it was kind of a stumper for me. And then it began for me. So I was around 37. I started to notice just a lot of fatigue. I started to notice anxiety for the first time in my life. I started to notice what I like to call undeserved weight gain when you change nothing. And I mean, I was a trainer, so I was working out 6 days a week, cravings, moodiness, like all these things, irregular periods. And the real kicker for me, Evan, was that I stopped sleeping well. Like it had always been one of my superpowers. And I was waking up in the night sweats, things like that, and starting to have digestive issues. And that was what kind of sent me to my healthcare practitioner, who was wonderful, asked all the questions, did all the tests, and was like, Bria, you're the picture of health. And I was like, I don't know, at 37, if this is the picture of health, like, I don't know what I can do another 37 years like this. And really, Evan, that was kind of the big turning point for me in finding new ways, better understanding, what's going on, because I knew as I kind of unwound my journey in my health, as I started to become my own health detective, I started to recognize a real gap in women's health and the understanding of female bodies, but really better understanding what's going on for me in these perimenopause years and these shifting years. And I figured if I didn't know these things as someone in the health and wellness world, how on earth was any other woman who's doing other wonderful things outside of the health and wellness world, how are they ever going to know? And that was what kind of drove me into better understanding like holistic health coaching and female hormones, and entered FDN in that process. So I would say I was really enjoying working with women, but I felt like I was missing something in how I could help them. And I interviewed the amazing Jennifer Woodward on my podcast, and that was how I heard about FDN. I was like, what? This is something I can learn and not have to go to like med school for? And that was it. I was just completely hooked. I went all in and have just absolutely fallen in love with being an FDN and how I can help put the puzzle together with my clients about their health.
Okay, well, that adds up is like attracts like. And if Jennifer Woodward comes on, you're either getting FDN or you're going to have a damn good opinion about it afterwards because,
Yeah.
yeah, she's a rock star. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So much to break down here. I love kind of dissecting the story afterwards.
Mhm.
So obviously, we're working with clients. You have an
Mhm.
interest in health overall. But
Yeah.
until that 37-year-old mark, was holistic health and natural stuff on the radar, or was it more kind of that fitness focus?
Fitness focus, fitness and nutrition. Like, yeah, calories in, calories out.
Got it. So obviously a step above the average person, but
Mhm.
still, sometimes I could be wrong, but sometimes those people almost have the hardest time making the transition. At least I found from interviews on the podcast. I'm not saying that's you. I don't know enough
Yeah.
yet, but I think it's because they have just enough knowledge to feel, oh, I do
Mhm.
know my stuff. I think the average person at the very least understands they don't know much about holistic health.
Yeah.
But when we do have a system that we've been working with for a while and it does work for some
Mhm.
period of time, then it can be very tough and kind of paradigm shifting when it doesn't. So clearly, though, you're still closer to the holistic space than just let's say an accountant, someone that has no interest, or I shouldn't say they don't have an interest, but is not working in this world
Yeah.
every single day. Fitness is obviously very close to us. So how long did it actually take, though, from the time that you go to a Western medicine folk, it sounds like?
Mhm.
Again, you said they're a good person. It's not that they were trying to screw you over. I appreciate you
Yeah.
acknowledging that. That's
Yeah.
too much of a misconception in the functional medicine space. But nonetheless, they couldn't get you answers.
Mhm.
I'm just saying, as someone who's interviewed a lot of people, most of the time, people don't just jump the next day and say, Eureka, it must be something else and it must be natural. So, how did you make that transition from kind of getting told there's nothing we can do to, I mean, now you're in a whole separate career path in a sense.
Yeah.
So, what were the next steps, literally?
Yeah. So I think first I started to turn to anything I could learn on, like the female hormone cycle, I think. So I was definitely looking at books, looking to Alyssa Vides in the flow, anything I could find on, perimenopause and hormones so that I could better, because I felt like, well, this is definitely off. So we'll start here. And I found IIN. I became an integrative, health coach with them. And so I think it was 4 to 6 months from that kind of doctor's appointment, while I really started to understand and kind of unwind my own bad behaviors, or my own behaviors that maybe weren't supporting me appropriately, and kind of had these beautiful aha moments of like, whoa, I thought I had enough information to be dangerous, I think is the saying that they call it. I thought I don't have everything figured out, Evan. I'm a mom, there's a lot of things I don't have figured out, but I'm like, I thought I had my health figured out. Yeah. And it was a real eye opener during that journey. So I would say it was 4 to 6 months of like educating myself, trying things, putting together, as I said, that puzzle of my own health until I felt amazing and knew I had to share the information.
Well, yeah, thank you for that transparency, because that's kind of what I was referring to. It's like we walk around, and I don't think most people think they're good at everything, but especially something that's our career path, you would think that's at least the one thing that we can have confidence in. And when that starts to not work, it can be, it's humbling and it just sucks. But then there's also always an opportunity for something really amazing and beautiful on the other side. So it's kind of cool to see it as it's played out. Now, did you just start, because I'm asking this because the natural next move for people is not necessarily to start doing their own research. That is not what everyone does. A lot of people in our space do it. We live in a bubble that does that. That is not what the average person does. So is that just who you are personality wise? I know that has a lot to do sometimes with like entrepreneurship, these self-starters. Did you just like, I'm not taking no for an answer, I'll go figure this out, whatever that means? Is that just who you are?
Yeah, I think that is. At the end of the day, it was like, I don't know where else to turn. And at 37, I was like, I don't know what other choice I have, because my livelihood was tied to it and my sanity was tied to it. So it was like, what are my options here? And so it was like, let's try to figure it out.
All right, so we'll fast forward a little bit. We move down the road. We're lucky enough to have Jennifer Woodward on the podcast, and the rest is history. Now we're at FDN. So while you're going through FDN, for those that don't know, it's not a pitch for FDN, although sign up for the course, that'd be great. We do include these foundational labs in the cost of tuition, because we always want you to kind of be your first client, if you will. To the degree that you're willing and able to share, I'd love to know what were some of the findings on the labs, because that is normally the place where people with a background like yours are validated, because they already knew that they didn't feel good, but they're kind of surprised too, because again, you hold this picture of health in your head, but then you find these things on the labs that can be worked on. So what'd you find?
Yeah. So, and it's funny because I had done a lot of my own, by the time I found FDN, I'd been, a year and a half at least well into, helping other women with this. So I'd done a lot of work on myself with the DRES, DRES part of for the protocol, I'd say. Diet, rest, exercise, stress management were a huge part of my foundational health, and really what I had leaned on to kind of make this comeback in my own health. But I always find I love the labs because I find them very humbling and motivating in their own way, because it's like you can no longer hide from the truth on the paper. But I had been starting to have digestive issues again. So it was really interesting. One, I was in the compensatory phase with my stress and that my cortisol levels, which was interesting to see. My hormones were looking good, which I'd kind of figured, but my indican was highly elevated. I had H. pylori, which I didn't know. And I'd say those were some of the biggest things that kind of cropped up that I was like, yeah, I guess that tracks. Like, and it was just, it really correlated with the symptoms that I was having.
So it sounds like you had more of the experience of, I mean, no one likes anything not great on the labs. I get that, but it sounds like it was more validating than anything. And like, hey, now I have something to work on.
Yeah. Yes. It was validating. And as I said, and always also a little humbling where you're like,
yep.
Oh, I thought it was another situation of like, oh, I thought I'd figured this out. I thought I was going to get these beautiful, like A+ labs. Right. But at the same time, I think, because I find with women, and I only work with women, so I can only speak to them, but we're really good at pretending we're fine and not even noticing that we're not fine. So it almost was like, oh yeah, I guess I am feeling these things. Oh yeah, I guess I am having these issues. Yeah. So it was really a very good mirror for me to be introspective about how I was feeling in my body and not just pretend everything's okay.
That's such a good point. I think as a man, I would say it's a human experience, but I do think men and women handle it a little bit differently, because men are almost stupid about it. And I mean that respectfully, but I look at I'll be very vague. I look at older men that I know, and it's like all of a sudden they have a heart attack or something. And
Yeah.
you're like, have you've been working 16 hours a day for the last like 10 years? Like, have you noticed anything wrong? Oh, yeah, I feel this, that, and the next thing I take 5 Advil a day, whatever. And it's like, okay, brother, that was a warning sign. There was something going on because that did not just happen overnight. And obviously, yeah, I'm not laughing about the heart attack itself, but I do see that where there's clearly something in human nature where we kind of like almost repress these things or deny them and then until we can't anymore. And that's what's particularly powerful about the labs though and the FDN system. It's not just something that can be used on someone who has like me 7 different diagnosed conditions and knew very well that they're sick. This could have been used on me at 5 years old when the very first symptoms started manifesting to
Mhm.
prevent anything from happening. And I would go as far as to say it probably could have been used on me and you before any symptoms happened to find some of this stuff, you know?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the most powerful aspects of it. Like I absolutely love working with people who maybe their health is at like a 4 out of a 10. We're getting up to those 5, 6, 7s, and 8s. But I think there's something really powerful about being an 8 and getting yourself to a 10. And
Oh
for
yeah.
me, it's like annual labs. Like I just do the research to see what's coming down the pipeline to course correct.
Yes. We got one comment here. So, by the way, welcome. If you're on with us, feel free to throw some questions to our guest. You'll probably have more questions as we go about 10 more minutes in because I'm going to start getting into some specifics about her work. But I just appreciate you sharing this with us, Meredith. She said she also had H. pylori. And what's very interesting about H. pylori is that it's estimated to be in about 50% of Africa, or people living in Africa, I should say. And here in America, it's estimated to be about 30% of people. Now, you tell me this, because this would be a good segue. I have found H. pylori is completely overrepresented in my clients, in FDN trainees. I would go as far as to say I see this 80+% of the time, which is remarkable because I'm not saying that that means it's causal for all health issues. That's ridiculous. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just find it very interesting that the general estimate is that, and then yet in people that are chronically ill, we start to see this. I have my theories around that, but I'm just wondering, do you find that it's kind of overrepresented in your clients?
Absolutely. 80% I think is very 80% plus is very accurate on all the GI maps, which and I run that is a standard lab for me on every single person. It is easy 80%.
Very interesting. So the reason that this is a segue for me is because I want to start talking about how you actually restore these things for people, how you restored your health. I mean, you look great. You can kind of see in someone when they have that glow about them. That's like true health. So I would imagine your labs are coming back pretty well right now, are pretty good, and I hope that they are. So
Yeah.
someone listening to this for the first time, or that might just be interested in you, might say, okay, really cool, guys. We're talking about a bacteria, and you mentioned something about Africa, and then you mentioned periods and hormones. How does this all connect? So can we start breaking down, because
Yeah.
it leads to bigger picture conversation. How on earth would something like a bacteria in our gut lead to issues around hormones or periods or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple things. I mean, very directly, I always think about like, I think about the hierarchy or the pathway of our metabolism. And if you think like the gut plays almost like a two-sided role, like its job, a big part of a healthy gut is breaking down and absorbing nutrients, which is what we need as the building blocks for our hormones. So it's kind of part of this messaging to the hormones. And then it's a key part of being able to metabolize out old hormones. So it's a huge part in two sides of how we feel hormonally in our body. And I'm talking about sex hormones and adrenal hormones and thyroid hormones. Like we're talking about all the hormones here, not just our sex hormones. So I think very directly it impacts that way. If something is off, if we have a bacteria that's causing stress or, chewing up our stomach acid is what we see with, H. pylori, then that's compromising our digestion, impacting the integrity of what our gut can provide in messaging to our body and also, elimination of our body. So right there, we're
Yes.
getting a big issue.
And
And then,
this is why this matters, because it's like we're not saying go run and just do something about this. That's not what we're saying at all. We're trying to give you one micro example of the hundreds that are out there that don't get looked at typically in conventional medicine. Ironically, this is one that would get looked at, just not for the reasons that we're talking about, right?
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, and I think this is where it really speaks to my clientele, so women over 35, is as we head into these hormonally shifting years, I call it in perimenopause, it is an added energy demand on the body. So now the body has another job. We're all out here juggling 100 balls. Now there's 101 balls. And I think of this shifting time for a lot of women as, it becomes a bit of the straw that breaks the camel's back. So if we don't have enough energy supply to meet the demand of the body, because now we have another demand going on, then we slip into what I like to call health debt. And that's when I think every function that we talk about in the body and all these hidden stressors that can come to light that aren't typically tested, it's when they really become a lot more problematic for us because we've just got more demand.
Well, and I know, so it's kind of funny to always just share this stuff, but I like the guests to know where I'm coming from. So one of the things that we send our guests, if you're a listener, is we'd like to know what are the three like main things you'd love for the audience to know. And I think this is a perfect time for that because you had as one of your things like the 5 steps that these
Mhm.
women can take. So can we start breaking down some of these steps that they can take? Because I think this is so common, not normal, but common for people to be going through perimenopause or just the years around that. And I mean, their life's on fire, right? Their body feels literally on fire sometimes. And
Yeah.
they're being told that this is acceptable and normal. And then I have women on here that it's like, no, this, they were already like into this stuff beforehand and they're flying through this, feeling great, having some of the best years of their life. So let's start with these 5 steps that you've come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to use, when I'm giving the 5 steps, I love to use this metaphor of health debt, right? Because I think health debt can be really similar to financial debt, which I think a lot of people can understand it a bit more black and white. Like debt compounds. So if we don't address it, it's going to get worse. And in order for us to achieve things like weight loss or muscle gain, which I know a lot of people are looking for, we have to have energy surplus to invest in those things. So if we imagine perimenopause comes along, right, and or something else in your life, right? For those of you, I think it applies to any other condition or any other thing that happens in life, creating this health debt. What is the first thing we want to do if we're looking at a debt situation? We kind of want to go through the credit cards and we want to make sure that we're eliminating anything that is unnecessarily sucking money or sucking energy out of the body. So first, I think step number 1 is always to take a really good look at kind of our key 4 health pillars: our diet, our rest, our exercise, our stress management, and pull out the things that are costing us more energy than they are providing. So very simply, I think that's when it comes to sleep, that's like not going to bed or waking up at a regular time. That's looking at screens before bed, right? These are habits that can kind of throw that sleep off really, really quickly and suck more energy. With nutrition, it's eliminating those inflammatory foods and anything we know that bothers us. So alcohol, too much caffeine, gluten, dairy, all the things that we know are really not providing as much energy as they are robbing the body of energy in that way. With exercise, a lot of the times, and this is a big one for me coming from a fitness background, sometimes it's not the time to be doing harder exercise. We need to be looking at functional movement like walking, like yoga and expansion and stress reducing activity. And then of course in stress, it's like, what is our daily stress management or joy activity? So that's step number 1, Evan, I would say.
I,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. No, you
No,
got
you
it.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I like the analogy because the reason I like almost looked off for a second is I'm like I've heard the concept of like health debt almost or Elizabeth Gaines, our education director, kind of uses a similar analogy, but I almost just connected something. It was like an aha moment of sorts, a mini one, where I have said so many times on here that I find a lot of people get almost like 70% better in the first few months. And then the
Mhm.
real work begins. Those last, 20, 30%, you can do it. You absolutely can, but it's going to take more time. And I was just thinking it's a great analogy because, yeah, if you went for the credit cards first, it's like the highest interest rate stuff you're
Yeah.
almost getting. And if you
Yes.
eliminate a few of those with like $2,000, $3,000 balances, you
Yeah.
actually feel very empowered. There's your 70%. And now you
Yeah.
got to get the student loans. So, what do we got for step number 2?
Yeah. So step number 2, it's like, okay, now we stop the bleeding, right? We've ended all the memberships to the things we're not paying for or that we're not even using. So now we're no longer bleeding out energy where we aren't, using this energy. And so the next logical step number 2 is about really increasing our energy supply through, I think, the most effective salary increase we can do, which is through our nutrition. So really nailing that fuel mixture, using metabolic typing to really better understand, like, am I getting like the diverse food? Am I getting that right fuel mixture to keep me full and satisfied and with good, clean energy all day in between meals and not snacking all day or skipping meals or things like that. So that's step number 2 is like increase that energy salary by nailing your fuel mixture and taking the month it takes or the few weeks it takes to know your body and her or his response to food.
That's straightforward enough. Okay, so we got get rid of the high interest stuff, if you will,
Yeah.
increase the salary. I feel like I'm talking to Dave Ramsey. What do we got for number three?
Yeah. So for me, step number 3 comes down to finding these hidden stressors. Now we want to make sure to kind of do the deep dive and use some great labs like we do at FDN to better understand where the kind of kinks are in the energy supply chain to the body, I think. So we want to get in there. We want to start working on those hidden stressors, and get the supply chain kind of back working so energy's flowing the way it should be in the body.
Let's definitely break into this one. So,
Yeah.
what are some of I always got to keep in my mind that there could be someone listening for the first time, and I never want them to get the wrong impression about stuff. So just like we mentioned, gut bugs and stuff, that's not always what it is. What I will say though is people who have worked with a similar clientele for a long
Mhm.
period of time, such as yourself, or just even in a large volume, you start to notice patterns that might be
Yeah.
unique to your clientele. I think that's fair to
Yeah.
say. Almost every FDN that's come on has agreed with me. So, in terms of hidden stressors, do you find that there is not always for those listening, but common themes that come up? Like, are there typical things you're seeing on hormone results or heavy metals, whatever you might be using? I'd love to know some of the maybe top 2 or 3 common hidden stressors you're finding.
Yeah, I mean, yes, no problem. Absolutely. I will see, in a GI map, I will see dysbiosis in the gut, H. pylori. Some of those immune markers are off for sure, low SIG-A. And I guess again, I want to be careful about saying things for people to understand. But yeah, dysbiosis in the gut. So like compromised digestion. So we're not breaking down and absorbing the food. So I'd say that's a pretty common one that I see. Certainly, when we're getting into more stress and hormones, I'm seeing more HPA axis dysfunction, where, even free and metabolized cortisol are not where they should be. And even just liver congestion, right, in the metabolization of our hormones. So I'd say those are some of the most common things that I see on when I'm looking at women in these areas.
And I'm guessing when they hear about this stuff, this is probably a brand new world to most, maybe not all of them, but to most of them when they realize that this is what's going on with them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, I really like to take a lot of time to break it down because these things are confusing. And
Yeah.
I find that most of my clients are like, wow, I didn't understand this stuff about my body at all. And I think when we know more, when we understand more about our body, we make different decisions.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh, the education is truly power with
Yeah,
all of this stuff. Ignorance is not bliss.
yeah.
We walk around for sometimes 20 years, I'm finding, and in a different career path, not even focusing on this stuff. And so, yeah, no, I mean, some of these clients that you end up working with, they don't even necessarily intentionally go out to learn new things of any category, right? They might just pick up stuff at their job. So when you're starting to teach them this stuff, it's heavy. There's quite
Yeah.
a lot here. It can get quite technical. Definitely don't have to do that for every client, but it is great to give them the empowerment of understanding how they got
Mhm.
to where they're at, what's going on now, and then how the heck they get out of it. So we had 1 with the health debt, we had 2 with the salary increase,
Yeah.
3 with the hidden stressors,
Yep.
and what's number 4?
Yeah. So number 4, I feel like is when you kind of get your accountant involved, right? If you've ever used an accountant and you're like in the financial example here, it's like, let's find all the tax saving areas. So I think one of the most powerful ways that we have energy supply coming into us, like I think sleep is a great energy supply, nutrition's a good energy supply, and one of the most underrated is like joy and pleasure and purpose. So I think we want to look to what I call hidden external stressors in our life and really get into more of the soul food of what's going on. I definitely think in this area, we want to address toxins in our life in terms of like actual toxins in our air, in our products, in our water. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area to take a look at the things that bring us purpose, our connection to something bigger, our home environment, our relationships, our joy, those kinds of things, and really start to prioritize these parts of our life because they give so much energy to us when we nail it, and they suck so much energy when they don't.
I think we can forget about, not intentionally, but we forget about those things sometimes on our healing journey. I was just talking to a guy today. I had one of my health issues was very bad acne, and I isolated because of that because I was so embarrassed, which,
Mhm.
I mean, yes, it was embarrassing. So there's stress from that. But then the irony is, as I'm isolating, trying to quote unquote heal, I'm isolated. That's not good for your health, right? You're not following your purpose at that time or focused on that if
Yeah.
you're just worried about your skin constantly. So it's tough to balance all of those at the same time. But I like that you at least plant the seed for your clients because you can get so lost eventually, not in the beginning. It is important in the beginning, but you can get so lost with the lab, supplements, and diet that you forget some of the things that just make us healthy as human beings, which is connection, having joy, having purpose, and ideally you'd have all those together. But I have found this is coming from someone who was so sick it's almost unimaginable at this point. I have found that I can get away with a lot more stuff now that there's healthy relationships and connections in my life. I have a clear purpose. It's kind of weird, all the stuff that you can cheat on, if you will, when those things are in check. So I think that's awesome that you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I look at it as like having a good tax account. They're finding you energy. It's finding yourself energy that you didn't even know was possible.
Mm-hmm. All right. What's fifth in your system?
Okay. And number 5 is, now at this point, I always find my clients are like, okay, I have more energy I don't know what to do with. And now it's about time to take this energy and invest it in the right investment that gives back to us. And I am a huge believer in one of the best investments you can make is muscle development and fitness on your body. It's building that lean muscle. It's, protecting your bones, your brain, your heart, your health, your hormones as you build that muscle. So it's just making sure you're investing it in the right kind of fitness, because I think cardio is like buying a great car. It's super fun, but it costs a lot of money in the moment you drive it off the lot. It never maintains the value that it had. Weightlifting, resistance training it's like buying a house. It's almost a guaranteed ROI if you keep it long enough.
Is that, I mean, you're so experienced with this, so maybe it's not anything to you at this point, but is that hard to get across to your clients? I just only ask because so many women that I know, especially if they were in their 30s or 40s, are like, oh, I'm afraid of getting bulky. Now, they also don't realize how impressive that actually would be, or tough that would be, to literally get bulky from just muscle development as a 40-year-old woman. But that's besides the point. That's the belief. So you sometimes have to work through that we're not just going to run 10 miles on the treadmill, but we're going to, bench press, or we're going to barbell squat. Is that tough?
Yeah, that's the work I find, is like undoing the mess that's in, the beliefs in the mind around something that's not providing, that's not a good investment for your time. So yeah.
All right. I want to dive a little deeper into some of the nerdy stuff. We can definitely go there because this channel, I mean, they love the lab and learns, and that's about as nerdy as it gets on here. So let's talk about, if someone was to work with you, what that process would look like. No worries if you're not using the FDN foundationals. I forgot to tell you that beforehand. Everyone always freaks out. We do promote, guys, just so you know, these FDN foundational labs. We like to run them in the beginning, especially if you're just starting out. Some people take their business very seriously, and then maybe they learn to modify certain things that are relevant to their client base, but they only know to modify it because they actually did the work first. So keep that in mind. With that said, if someone was to come work with you, what type of lab tests and investigation can they expect? I know you said GI map. I would love to know some others.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm always doing, like, I do always do a metabolic typing test to kind of get that fuel mixture. I know that's not one of the labs, but I lead into there. And when I started, I of course did the foundational labs, because I think that you're right. That is absolutely, it's like learning the basics before we can kind of advance. So I learned so much through those, but the standard labs that I run right off the bat for my clients are going to be a GI map, a Dutch complete, and a thyroid panel.
Okay. So there's a chance that, you're not doing anything else. Like, just the standard is going to be that with metabolic typing.
Yeah.
Very interesting. This is why I love having these conversations, because I think it's so cool to see the unique subsystems, if you will, that people develop after they work with their clients. So let's definitely, the one that you got me with right away is the thyroid panel. So that might be interesting to people listening. They're like, wait, one, how can she even run a thyroid panel? They don't understand that you have access to this in most of America, at least. Sorry for the people that listen from other countries. We know that we got you guys very tough there without a doctor. Here you can pay out of pocket. So why a thyroid panel? Of all the things that you could do, of all the labs that are out there, you chose 3 in a test, basically, not because metabolic typing is not a literal lab test for those that don't know. So why that one?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I mean, thyroid hormone is in every cell of our body. So I think that's, recognizing the massive role that it plays in our total metabolic function. But for my clients, when a lot of the symptoms in perimenopause and menopause are going to be things like stuck weight, inability to put on muscle, fatigue, brain fog, irregular periods, sex hormone imbalance, not sleeping well, hair loss. I mean, all of that lines up with thyroid as well. And just like we said, Evan, that, for you and I both, like 80+% of clients I'm seeing are positive H. pylori. I would say I'm pretty close to that on a Dutch of seeing a very common sluggish thyroid pattern in the metabolized to free cortisol when we have that come up on the lab. So it's just, it's not an expensive lab. For my clients that aren't in the US, I can often just give them the markers and have their doctor add it, so then I can look at it for them, which is really great. And it tells me so much, or it rules out so much for me.
Have you, because for those that don't know, as FDNs, we do get asked this all the time. That's why I'm saying it. As FDNs, guys, we're not doctors. We can't diagnose anything. There are doctors who are FDNs, but they would be wearing their doctor hat if they were to give a diagnosis or something. One of the tricky things, if you ran a thyroid panel, it's not in a bad way. It's just, I'm imagining if you run that on enough people, there has to be someone that you ran these on where maybe their markers are really out of range to the point where, like, do you ever have to refer out to get looked at for Hashimoto's or something?
Yeah, you just refer out the same way you do, a referral note for H. pylori or a parasite or something. You send a referral note for sure.
The reason I ask this is because I think this is such a cool thing about what we get to do, because we'll look places that others don't even typically look until the person is way, way too sick. I shouldn't say too sick. You can always come back from a lot of things, but we're really banged up now. So for you to be able to find that, and just so the audience is clear, we're not sending it out to the doctor and saying, okay, our work here is done. You're helping them. One, you're doing the right thing, because we should always do that. But two, you're kind of giving them that life jacket, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always, I always say it's like when it comes, whether we need to use supplements to help, whether we need to use, pharmaceuticals to help that a doctor might provide, it doesn't negate the fact that the foundation of our health, this diet, rest, exercise, stress management, has to be there to get the most benefit out of whatever medicine or support is going to help us achieve our optimal health. You can't avoid that. Like, it's an inevitable part of optimizing your health. You might be able to take a pill and be okay, but if you want to be great, which is what I want and what most of my clients want, we've got to have that health foundation. So most of them still need this support anyway, to get them feeling as best as they can. So that last piece, should they need it, makes it amazing.
I feel like we're so lucky to be a part of this community. I think we're truly some of the most level-headed functional practitioners, because people get into this space and then it's like you have to be a purist about everything. I'm like, ma'am, you just drank Diet Coke 3 times a day for the last 40 years, using a medication that a doctor could actually prescribe you for what you have right now that's going to make you feel amazing virtually overnight. Depending on when your TSH is, you could literally feel amazing overnight. And then you're also going to be doing the deep work at the same time. I know I'll piss at least someone off in the audience when I say stuff like that. I think that is great detective work. I think it's smart. And I think especially if the person's under an extreme amount of stress already and you can give them that quick boost, you're debating in your head, what is more detrimental to the body? The stress of the effects that they're dealing with right now, or the stress of the medication? I don't think we know that 100%. And many times, I mean, we're not talking about a chemotherapy drug or something. Many times the stress of that medication is actually less than what they're dealing with right now. And thank God, again, we're doing the deep work. We're not saying go on the medication and just hope for the best for the next 30 years. That's just as inappropriate. So this is so cool, though, that you've been able to help facilitate those conversations with doctors to find these things. I'm sure your clients are like super impressed with that.
I think so. I think they're happy. As long as they're feeling great, right? That's the goal.
Yes. Let's go into the Dutch a little bit. So one of the foundational labs that we teach at FDN, guys, you'll see this here a lot, is the SHP. So that's a salivary hormone test. You'll do 4 samples throughout the day. Dutch is pretty advanced. Definitely can be extremely relevant in people who are working with the type of clientele that you are. We will never be able to explain the Dutch in one podcast, let alone in a few minutes. So just from the higher level overview, what are some of the main typical insights, even like kind of going back to that other question, common patterns that you're finding with these women on the Dutch test?
Yeah, I think what I think one of the most valuable things I think about the Dutch is that we're not just getting the levels, but we're getting kind of the function of the metabolization of these hormone levels as well. So we get to answer a little bit more of why even and where the root cause is coming from. So when we're talking about our sex hormones, we really get into understanding how it is being metabolized down, like the first pathway or the second pathway. So we're getting some things pointing at our liver, we're getting some things pointing at our gut in there. And so I do see, I'd say with main sex hormones, we're seeing, I get to see if there's estrogen dominance or not, but then I also get to see maybe why there might be estrogen dominance, because we're kind of coming down that pathway and seeing how the estrogen or the estradiol is being metabolized in the body, and is it coming down the right path or not. So I think that's one of the coolest things that I love about it.
The way that you answered my one question about what labs do you use, you mentioned Dutch, the thyroid panel, GI map, and then metabolic typing test. Uh,
Mhm.
it implied to me that occasionally you do bring out some other ones. What other labs do you not utilize every time, but utilize frequently enough? I'm curious what else you offer clients.
Yeah, I mean, a food sensitivity test might come into play for sure, or the mucosal barrier assessment for sure, or some of the standard ones as well, and HTMA, so a hair test mineral, like the mineral hair test mineral analysis as well, depending on what we're seeing in these other labs and how the client is feeling as we progress through the protocol. But those are
Got
probably
it.
some of the more common ones I would point to at that point.
Okay, so you have your foundationals that you're
Mhm.
using as things that can obviously provide direct clues and things to work on. Could also provide clues for more lab testing, so that we're not just running it blanket right out of the bat and spending extra money. I think every client
Yes.
appreciates that. So we
Yeah.
do the labs. We're looking at that stuff. How long do people typically work with you for? What could they expect again if they were to work with you? Is it 3 months, 6 months? Is it different for
Yeah.
different people?
No, I mean, occasionally, but typically I say we work together for about 8 calls and we stretch them over 3 to 5 months. It really is gonna be a lot dependent on the person, because if things move really quickly and then we might talk very quickly, every week, every other week, so then we might just get to those 3 months. But if we kinda need to stretch, we need to give time for, things to be put into practice, for habits to be created, then sometimes we stretch that out where I'd say it could even work up to close to 6 months should I need. But it's really more about the time we spend and the connection in between, I think, to keep them accountable and on track.
I like it that way. That's actually how my wife and I structure ours. We do it by calls or sessions, whatever, because it allows for the flexibility that is needed in all of our lives,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
even ourselves. So it works very well for the client, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if they need to add on more, or they want to add on more, or just do a monthly maintenance or something after that, we can do that at that point because we've done a lot of this underlying work together.
Yep. All right. If you guys have direct questions for Bria, please put them in the chat. This will be kind of your last few minutes and opportunity to be able to do that. I am now going to ask you one of my favorite questions because I think it's so cool to see us overcome some of these challenges. But then
Mhm.
sometimes the audience might think, in my opinion, well, yeah, but they're so dedicated to this. This is what they do with their lives. And it's like, well, no,
Mhm.
we're able to do this with our lives because we're helping people who don't do this with their lives with
Yeah.
this stuff. So this happens all the time. They're just not on the podcast. So can
Mhm.
you talk to me again to the degree that you're able, just for privacy's sake? What is like one of your favorite client turnaround stories? Someone coming to you maybe at the end of the rope, they're feeling like hell, and you were actually able to be the person that would be able to help them. I'd love to know one or two stories that come to mind when I ask that.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I love them all. But yes, I had a client who, worked really hard on her own health, but she just like she wasn't sleeping. Like she couldn't even sleep in the same bed as her husband. They hadn't slept together for like in the same bedroom for 10 months because her sleep was so off and she had a lot of skin issues and was just constantly bloated. No matter what she ate, it just seemed like. So, through the 3 to 4 months that we worked together, not only did she get pretty much back into the bed with her husband where she was sleeping properly, no more bloating ever again after 2 years of bloating. And then she also released a lot of weight. She was back down to like her wedding dress size. And I'm talking about a 48-year-old woman, right? This is, the areas that I work in. And it was just, she's a business owner. She's successful. Like it was just so happy to see her flourish and want to get back on with life. And that one really just brings me so much joy. I had another client who was really just wanting to feel her best and was just not feeling the best. Like I think she just was like, I'm about to turn 50. I don't feel great. I want to feel better. And so for me, it was a really cool experience to kind of work with someone who didn't feel awful, didn't even really have much weight to lose, but just didn't feel her best, to help her kind of go from feeling okay and thinking that was maybe how she's supposed to feel at almost 50 to like getting texts with her saying like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could have this much energy. Oh my gosh, like I didn't know, I could look this good or feel this glowy or eat this much, things like that kind of come into place. And I think that those are some of those things are the things that make me the happiest, when they can get back to life
Yeah,
and to thrive.
that's that's the whole point of all of this, in a sense. And I don't. Not every practitioner, to me, seems to fully, I don't want to say get that, but I don't think they understand the weight of it. So I like that you brought that up. And I don't know if I'm just more connected to it because I was so sick from so young. I didn't feel like I had a life until I
Mm.
was freed of the health issues. And I'm like, this is incredible that my main focus on a daily basis is not how do I just get through the day? How do
Yeah.
I stay away from people because my skin looks so bad? How do I not deal with depression or a
Mhm.
panic attack? Like to
Mhm.
wake up and then it's a whole new set. There's always something as a human, right? Because then it's a whole like, all right, well, how do I be productive? How do I find that
Yeah.
purpose? Which I thought was so powerful being in your steps because that's the issue that most people that don't have health issues deal with. I think they are
Mhm.
dealing with that external stressor of what the heck do I go do with my
Yeah.
very limited time here? And I think that's one of the beautiful trade offs sometimes of having these health issues is it was clear as day what I needed to do once it was healed. I wasn't in limbo for very long. You know, like
Yeah.
you know exactly where you want to go.
Yeah.
Amber actually asked a question here. Thanks, Amber, and no problem for missing the beginning. She just asked, could you please define health debt again? And I think it's definitely a analogy that's worth redefining.
Yeah, for sure. So I really feel like everything, optimal health in life is really all about energy supply and demand. Is our energy supply meeting or exceeding our energy demand? And health debt is when our energy supply does not meet or exceed our energy demand in our body. Because I think when that happens, first and foremost, the body starts to conserve in areas that we don't want it to conserve. It conserves energy, it conserves fat, it breaks down muscle, it shuts down all non-essential personnel like our sex hormones and reproduction. And then I think when it stays in that health debt, it starts to rob from other functions and other areas of our body. And that's when we start to really feel crummy. So that's, yeah, the definition of health debt is really when our energy supply is not meeting our energy demand.
Awesome. Thank you, Bria, and thank you, Amber.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about where people can find you. I also want to shout out your podcast. I constantly do that on our show. I always say podcasts, hopefully, are replacing people's TV screens. And when you watch TV, you don't just have one show that you watch, you tune into a bunch of stuff every week. So I'm
Mhm.
all for encouraging people to listen to other ones, especially if it's relevant to them. So I will say it again. It is always funny saying this as a 29-year-old male, but The Period Whisperer is what it's called. And I'm sure it's an awesome show. So, other than the obvious, what can they expect to learn there if they check out your show and listen?
Yeah, so the Period Whisperer, I do a solo cast every week, and I have a expert guest every single week. So there's 2 drops a week, and it's everything surrounding, I think, optimizing health and hormones over 35 for women. So that's what you're gonna get real tips, you're gonna get motivation, you're gonna get really interesting conversations, and just overall education and knowledge around women's health.
Very cool. Thank you. And if we could, I thought we had something to share with that. I'm sorry. So obviously they can get it on your website though as well. And where can
Yeah.
they find your website?
Yeah, it's briatheperiodwhisperer.com, or you can come hang out on Instagram at Bria_period_whisperer. I share a lot of quick tips and short little reels there for information. So anywhere you get your podcast, Instagram, website, just come say hi. This is one of the great loves of my life.
Nice. Very cool. I actually got done a minute earlier than I normally do. So I have my signature question for you, but I have one bonus one that I'll throw in. And I get to do this about one every 15 times maybe. So I love asking this one. I just want to know what's next for you. I think it's so cool when people develop these passions. It is obvious that this lights you up. So I'm genuinely curious. What is next for you, whether it's a health goal, business goal, or whatever?
Yeah, I think this year has really been all about like evolving my knowledge in terms of like understanding these more in-depth labs and helping people as best as I can. I think, next year I'd like to look into, getting on some stages to talk more about this understanding of body and health debt and women's health, or write a book. I think those are the things on my radar.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Meredith said, thank you. I just gave your podcast a follow. Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks,
And thanks for letting us
Meredith.
know. Now
Thank you
she's
so
happy that she
much.
came on. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Our signature question to finish up the show. Please let us know, by the way, if and when the book's done, because we'd love to have you back. But the signature question on the show is this, just a general health question. If we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers or listeners to do one thing for their health. So that means you can get us to start doing one thing, or you can get us all to stop doing one thing. What is the one thing that Bria gets us to do?
It's a really hard one. um, I think, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Walk. Go for a walk every single day. Walk. That's what I
Awesome.
think. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're just really lucky and really happy to have you in the FDN community. And I know we'll be doing some 12 days of Christmas stuff soon. So if you guys are wondering what the heck that is, stay tuned for next podcast.